The hills around Florence are beautiful. They are covered in olive groves and vineyards. Old farmhouses sit on the slopes. For centuries, this part of Tuscany has been a symbol of peace and art. But for almost 20 years, something terrible haunted those hills. A killer. A shadow that moved in the dark. People called him Il Mostro di Firenze, the Monster of Florence. His story is not a simple one. It is a maze of bad police work, false accusations, and strange characters. It's a story with convictions that many people don't believe, and at its heart is a series of brutal crimes that have never been fully explained. It all began on a hot summer night in 1968, August 21st. A man named Antonio Lo Bianco and a woman named Barbara Lacci were parked in a car near the town of Signa. They were lovers. Lacci was married, and her young son, Natalino, was asleep in the back seat. Sometime after midnight, someone approached the car. The person fired 8 shots from a .22 caliber Beretta pistol. Antonio and Barbara were killed instantly. When the police arrived, they found a strange scene. The little boy, Natalino, was awake. He told them his father had arrived and hurt his mother. His father was actually his mother's husband, Stefano Mile. Mile was a laborer from Sardinia. He was quickly arrested. He confessed to the crime. He said he was angry about the affair. It seemed like an open and shut case, a crime of passion. But Mile's story was not. He soon changed his tune. He said he didn't do it alone. He started naming names, blaming other Sardinian men who lived and worked in the area. He accused Salvatore Vinci. Then he accused Francesco Vinci, then others. The police were pulled into a complicated web of feuds and accusations within this small community of Sardinian immigrants. For years, the investigation focused on them. Stefano Mile was convicted, but the police always suspected others were involved. The gun was never found, and for a while the case went cold. The 1968 murder was seen as a tragic but solved domestic dispute. Then, 6 years later, it happened again. September 14, 1974, 2 teenagers, Pasquale Gentilecore and Stefania Pettini, were parked in a car in a secluded spot near Borgo San Lorenzo. They were shot and killed. The weapon was a .22 caliber Beretta. Ballistics tests would later prove it was the exact same gun used to kill Lo Bianco and Locci in 1968. This was not a crime of passion. This was something else. And there was a new, horrific detail. After killing the couple, the murderer used a sharp knife to mutilate Stefania's body. He cut away parts of her pubic region with what seemed to be surgical precision. The police were stunned. They now knew they were not dealing with a jealous husband. They were dealing with a serial killer. The panic began to set in. Young couples in Tuscany were terrified. The term Il Mostro started appearing in the newspapers. The police had no idea who they were looking for. They went back to the old case files from 1968. They focused on the Sardinians again. Francesco Vinci, one of the men Mele had accused, was arrested. He spent years in prison before he was eventually cleared. The police were chasing ghosts. They were stuck on their original theory, and it was leading them nowhere. While they were looking in the wrong direction, the monster struck again. June 6, 1981, and Giovanni Di Nuccio and Stefania Calamandre were killed in their car near Scandicci. They were shot with the same .22 Beretta, and again the woman's body was mutilated. The killer was becoming bolder, more confident. Just a few months later, on October 22, 1981, he killed again. Stefano Baldi and Susanna Cambi were shot near Calanzano. The pattern was the same. The gun was the same. The horrific mutilation was the same. By now, the entire region was gripped by fear. Lovers' lanes, once popular spots for young couples, were now deserted. Police patrols increased, but the killer seemed to be invisible. He would strike, then vanish into the night. The police were desperate. They had no leads, no witnesses, just shell casings from an old gun and a brutal, terrifying signature. They started to look for anyone with a history of violence or strange behavior. They interviewed hundreds of people. They followed dead-end tips. The investigation was becoming a national embarrassment. In the summer of 1982, the monster killed again. Paolo Minardi and Antonella Migliorini were shot near Bacciano. But this time, something was different. Minardi was not killed instantly. He managed to put the car in reverse and drive a short distance before crashing. When the police found them, they initially thought it was a car accident. It was only later that the coroner found the bullet wounds. The killer had not performed his ritual mutilation. Perhaps he was interrupted, or perhaps the crashing car scared him away. This small deviation from the pattern gave investigators a tiny glimmer of hope. Maybe the killer had made a mistake, but it led nowhere. The killing stopped for a year. People wondered if the monster was dead or in prison for something else, but the silence was broken in September 1983. 2 young German tourists, Wilhelm Horst Meyer and Jens Uwe Rusch, were killed in their Volkswagen bus. They were both men. This was a major change in the pattern. At first, the police didn't even connect it to the monster. But the ballistics matched. It was the same Beretta. The police were confused. Why had the killer changed his target? Was he just killing for the sake of it now? Some theorize that in the dark, the killer mistook one of the men, who had long blonde hair, for a woman. We will never know for sure. The final two double murders were the most brazen of all. On July 29, 1984, Claudio Stefanacci and Pia Gilda Rontini were killed in their car. The same gun, the same mutilation. The killer was methodical, unstoppable, and then came the last and perhaps most chilling act. In September 1985, a French couple, Jean-Michel Krivachvili and Nadine Moriot, were camping in a tent in the woods near San Casciano. The killer found them. He shot them through the tent. He then dragged Nadine's body out and mutilated it more severely than any of the previous victims. But he wasn't done. A few days later, a shocking piece of mail arrived at the office of the public prosecutor. It was an anonymous letter. Inside was a small piece of human flesh. It was a piece of Nadine Moriot's breast. The monster was now directly taunting the people hunting him. It was an act of pure arrogance, and it was his last. After the 1985 murders, the killings stopped for good. But the mystery was far from over. With the monster gone, the pressure to solve the case was immense. The police needed a suspect, and they found one in a man named Pietro Pacciani. Pacciani was a farmer who lived in the countryside near Florence. He was a perfect fit for the profile of a rural monster. He was a coarse, violent man with a dark past. In 1951, as a young man, he had murdered someone. He caught his girlfriend at the time with another man, and he stabbed the man to death in a fit of rage. He then raped the girlfriend next to the dead body. He served 13 years in prison for that crime. After his release, he settled down, got married, and had children, but his violent streak never left him. He was known to beat his wife and was convicted of sexually abusing his two daughters. He was a monster, but was he the monster? The police thought so. They put him under surveillance. They searched his house and his land. The evidence they found was thin. They found a sketch he had drawn that looked vaguely like a key location in the crimes. They found a single .22 caliber bullet in his garden, which was the same brand used in the murders, but it was unfired and couldn't be linked to the gun. They found some newspaper clippings about the murders. It wasn't much. Despite the weak evidence, Pacciani was arrested and put on trial in 1994. The trial was a media circus. The prosecution painted him as a cunning, satanic brute. The defense portrayed him as an ignorant, simple-minded peasant who was being framed by desperate police. Pacciani himself was a volatile presence in the courtroom, often shouting and making crude gestures. In the end, the jury was convinced. Pietro Pacciani was found guilty of 7 of the 8 double murders. The 1968 crime was still officially attributed to Stefano Mele. He was sentenced to life in prison. The police and the prosecution declared victory. They had caught the Monster of Florence. But the story didn't end there. Pacciani appealed his conviction. And in 1996, something incredible happened. An appeals court overturned the verdict. The judges ruled that the evidence against him was too weak. There was no real proof linking him to the scenes of the crimes. Pietro Pacciani, the man everyone thought was the monster, walked free. The prosecution was humiliated. They immediately began working to get the case back to court. But now, their theory of the crime had changed dramatically. They no longer believed Pacciani acted alone, but had a new story to tell. A story about a gang. This new theory centered on a group of Pacciani's friends. They were a strange bunch of men from the same rural area. There was Mario Vanni, a postman known for his crude jokes and love of drinking. There was Giancarlo Lotti, a man with a low IQ who was easily led, and there were others. The prosecution called them the Compagni di Merende, which roughly translates to the companions of the snack. The name came from something Vanni had shouted during Pacciani's trial, claiming they were all just innocent friends who liked to get together for wine and snacks. The key to this new theory was Giancarlo Lotti. Under police questioning, Lotti broke down and confessed. He told a wild story. He said that he and Mario Vanni had accompanied Pietro Pacciani on several of the murders. He described the nights in the hills watching Pacciani shoot the couples. He claimed Pacciani was the one who did the shooting and the mutilations, while he and Vanni acted as lookouts. Lotti's confession was full of details. It seemed to be the breakthrough the police had been waiting for. Based on this new testimony, Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lotti were put on trial. They were both convicted and sentenced to life in prison. The Supreme Court also ordered a retrial for the now acquitted Pacciani. The plan was to try him as the leader of this murder gang, but the trial never happened. In February 1998, just before his new trial was set to begin, Pietro Pacciani was found dead in his home. He was 73 years old. The official cause of death was a heart attack. With him died any chance of knowing his full story. So, the official conclusion to the Monster of Florence case is this. The murders were carried out by a group of men, led by Pietro Pacciani, with Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Lodi as his accomplices. But for many people who have followed this case, this conclusion is deeply unsatisfying. It feels wrong. The companions of the snack theory has many problems. For one, Lodi's confession was a mess. He was an unreliable witness, he changed his story many times, many of the details he provided were wrong, he got dates, locations, and victim details incorrect. It often seemed like he was just repeating information he had read in the newspapers or been fed by the investigator. It's possible he was just a scared, simple man telling the police what he thought they wanted to hear. And the idea of these three men between an old, overweight farmer, a drunk postman, and a man with developmental disabilities forming a sophisticated serial killing team seems unlikely. The monster was a phantom. He moved silently in the dark. He struck with precision and escaped without a trace for 17 years. Could this bumbling group of companions really have pulled that off? Many find it hard to believe. This has led to other, darker theories. Lodi, in one of his many stories, mentioned something else. He claimed that they weren't just killing for themselves, he said they were getting the body parts for someone else. He mentioned a mysterious doctor who would pay them for these human trophies. This opened up a whole new line of investigation, often called the second-level theory. The idea is that Pacciani and his friends were just the grunts, the hired help. The real masterminds were a group of wealthy, powerful people in Florence. This theory suggests that the murders were part of a satanic ritual, and that the body parts were used in black magic ceremonies. The police actually pursued this lead. They investigated a pharmacist from a nearby town, a doctor, and other prominent local figures. They wiretapped phones and searched houses. They found some strange books on black magic, but they never found any concrete evidence of a satanic cult that commissioned serial murders. To many, this theory sounds like something from a movie. It seems too fantastic to be true, but to others, it's the only explanation that makes sense. It would explain where the money for the gun might have come from, and why a group of uneducated peasants would perform such precise surgical mutilation. And what about the gun? The .22 Beretta pistol is the one constant in all the crimes. It is the single most important piece of evidence, and it has never been found. Its history is a mystery in itself. The ballistics tied it to the 1968 murder committed by Stefano Mele, or at least, the murder he was convicted of. How did the gun get from the world of the Sardinians in 1968 into the hands of the killer who began his spree in 1974? Did one of the Sardinians, perhaps one who was never caught, continue the killings? Or did the gun get sold or passed on, eventually ending up with someone like Pacciani? No one knows. The missing gun is a giant hole in the center of the case. There are other suspects too. Those men who were investigated and then dismissed. The Sardinian, Francesco Vinci, who was accused by Mele and arrested after the 1974 murders, remains a person of interest for some researchers. He had a motive for revenge against the system that wrongly imprisoned him. Another man, a drifter known for his strange behavior, was also considered at one point. The entire investigation was plagued by mistakes from the very beginning. The police fixated on the Sardinians for years, ignoring the possibility that the 1968 crime was the work of the same person who started killing again in 1974. They may have lost crucial years where they could have been looking for the right person. When they finally moved on to Pacciani, the case against him was built on shaky ground. In the final theory, the companions of the snack relies almost entirely on the testimony of one very unreliable man. So who was the Monster of Florence? Was it Pietro Pacciani, the violent farmer? He was certainly capable of terrible things, but the evidence directly linking him to the crimes is almost non-existent. It's possible he was just a convenient scapegoat, a man so unpleasant that everyone wanted him to be guilty. Was it the companions of the snack? A gang of rural deviants who terrorized the hills for over a decade. It's the official answer, but it feels flimsy. It doesn't quite fit the profile of a silent, efficient killer. Was it a secret satanic cult, using Pacciani's crew as their puppets? It's a compelling cinematic theory, but it lacks any real proof. Or was it someone else entirely? Someone who was never even a suspect. A man who lived a normal life, maybe had a family and a job. A man who, on certain moonless nights, took his old Beretta pistol and went hunting in the hills. A man who got away with it. Maybe he died of old age, taking his secrets with him. Or maybe he's still alive. This is the enduring power of the Monster of Florence case. there are no satisfying answers. Every theory has holes. Every suspect comes with doubts. Mario Vanni and Giancarlo Latti both died in prison, sticking to their stories. Pietro Pacciani died in a state of legal limbo, convicted, then acquitted, and about to be tried again. The case files are officially closed. The Italian justice system says the case is solved. But in the minds of many Italians, and for true crime followers around the world, the shadow of the monster still lingers over the beautiful hills of Florence. The identity of the man who held a region in the grip of fear for so long remains a dark, unsettling mystery. We know what he did, we know how he did it, but we may never truly know who he was. And that is perhaps the most terrifying part of the whole story.